everyone, and welcome to another video. I'm Dr. Gale and glad to have you here. Hopefully we've got something that will inspire you to think a little bit more outside of the box when you're developing and working with your instructional materials. That is, if you stumbled on this video, if you're forced to watch it, hopefully it's not something that's going to be dreadfully boring, and we'll be able to make it a little bit engaging and interactive so that you can hopefully get something out of it. Now, this one that we're specifically going to be talking about today is we're going to be looking at different forms of interaction when we're creating materials for a class, and we're going to see how we can not only build those and think through those, but kind of put them all together to make a very good, hopefully educational experience by the end of it. So by the time we're done with this, hopefully not only will you guys realize that interactions can motivate and make the class more engaging, but we'll actually know the three types of interaction that we can get, and hopefully you guys will know the benefits of them and how to implement them again in the overall picture so that it makes just a good course experience for whoever's going through it. Now, there are various ways to be able to go ahead and enhance your class. We're not going to be able to cover all of those in one video, so we'll have to make some separate videos out there. If you see this introduction again, it's because it's basically the same intro for the different types of content. Now, some of the ones that we can talk about are visual design, visual interaction, information design. A lot of that kind of plays off of graphic design from the corporate arena. So if we take those principles and we put them into instructional materials, what we're trying to do is get a message across to students as fast as possible so that they can obtain that information and start building it into their memory banks and stuff like that. So that's visual design. We're not going to talk about that one in here, but that is one way we can also enhance the classes. A second way to do it is to enhance the relevance of a class. So if we can make it where the class or the instructional material or whatever we have is really personable to the student, it really makes an impact on them either in the future or it's something that pulls from memories that they've had in the past, especially with adults, that will enhance the engagement level in the course material as well. And then the other one that we're going to talk about today, and there are many more, so we're not, again, going to hit all these, but the one we're going to talk about a little bit today is intentional interactions that we can build in the class to try and make those materials or those activities or the lesson overall just more engaging. The more interaction we can get where they're not passively sitting there learning, the better off it will be, the more engaging, active it will be for us. So let's go ahead and look at some of the ways we can do that. All right, so there's three types of interaction that we're going to be talking about throughout this. One is student-to-content interaction. Two is going to be student-to-student interaction. And then the third one is going to be your student-to-instructor interaction. So each of those have different elements that we can interplay with and we can put into content, but each of those can also play with each other to make, again, an overall experience that's a lot better if we can hit all three of those into them. So let's take a real quick look and look at those individually and see what we get out of that. So the student-to-content interaction, that is going to be them actually messing and manipulating around with the content. Now, we can either passively give it to them where we just talk to them and lecture to them the whole time. They can watch a video, things like that. If we can make it more interactive and use software where they're physically having to go in and click or manipulate or do things, a lot more of the hands-on learning, that will usually make it a lot more engaging because they're having to interact with the system. The other thing we can do on that is we can give them choice options on how they're going to work with material going forward. So for example, if you have a project that is a process-oriented thing, say we're going to create like something in Microsoft Office, or Microsoft Word in particular. Instead of us just giving them a template and saying build Word doing this, we can give them a topic that they get to choose, they get to play with, they enjoy, and have them put that into the process. So it's not only that they're doing the process of Microsoft Word, but they're getting to do it with some kind of content that they chose and they enjoy. So again, if they can choose it, usually you're going to get more engagement out of it. They're going to be more excited about messing with that material or that activity. Now again, the other thing we want to look at is turning this as much into active learning as possible. So passive learning is where we are just giving them information and they're sitting there trying to get it in and retain it. Active learning is where we have them go out and find the information themselves or manipulate the information themselves. So we more pose questions, give them the resources and the guidance to go find the answers, and then we let them go find the answers and bring the stuff back. So they're having to actively go out and build that knowledge rather than, again, just sitting there listening to us, reading something, somehow grabbing that passively. So the more we can switch to an active learning environment, the better off they'll be on the engagement and motivation side as well. The last thing I'll talk about here is we can also try to gamify some of the content. And now that's not just simply trying to put some quiz questions into a Jeopardy format for a study guide. Okay, that's not true gamification. Gamification is basically taking the motivation elements of gaming where people want to go in. I heard once that gaming is basically putting challenges in front of you that make you feel better when you accomplish them. So it's going in and figuring out a way to put those motivational elements into an activity, into a lesson, so that while they're going through it and we're challenging them, we're putting them into that cognitive dissonance where they're having to build new knowledge, and it's hard, they're actually enjoying it a little bit more because it has those game elements in there. that are pushing them along. So that's a whole nother, I mean, you can make a whole class on that. There's books on that. But just know that it's not simply throwing up some kind of random matching and saying, hey, congratulations, you get some points. There are mechanics behind it, but if we can get that into the content, it's usually going to make it a lot more engaging as well. So those are ways that we can look at the student-to-content interaction and purposefully build that interaction in there. Let's take a look at the second one, which is student-to-student interaction. So on the student-to-student interaction, what we're trying to think of are purposeful ways that we can get the students to talk and engage and interact with one another. And yes, a lot of students are going to hate group work and things like that, but you can build mechanics in there to not make that as painful for them. But groups are one way that we can do that. If they're working together in a group to build something, they're at least talking, they're engaging with each other. Now, yeah, if it's a long-term group project, sometimes you got the slackers that kind of sit out on the side. Again, we can do mechanics to try and isolate that thing off. But the idea of being able to put groups and put students in the group so that they're working together will enhance that student-to-student interaction. And a lot of times they'll start making some friendships and bantering, especially if you keep those groups pretty static throughout the semester. There's benefits to static groups, there's benefits to random groups on different projects, but one way or the other, having them work together in teams is a little bit more fun. They like it, it's engaging. Another thing you can do is set up debates. Debates are just inherently good ways to have students interact and talk with each other. If you want to make sure that you kind of keep it on a cordial level, you go ahead and tell a student or a group of students this is the stance you're going to take on this topic, rather than letting them pick the one that they have, because a lot of times they'll get super passionate if it's something that they really are either opposed to or for. And so that can kind of turn into a little slippery slope almost when people are debating, which again, honestly, that's a skill we need to work on anyways. But if you go ahead and kind of mandate the way it goes with which way they have to stay on the debate, you can make sure that it's kind of an even playing field for both sides. And maybe it forces them out of the comfort zone and they have to go and look up some things on their own. But one way or the other, again, a debate is a way that we can easily get students to start talking with each other, because the nature of a debate is to have a conversation. So easy way to get student-to-student interaction in that. The other two that I want to talk about are kind of similar models, but the mechanics are a little bit different. You have a think, pair, share, and a jigsaw. And what essentially those are, you can look them up online to find out the true mechanics of them. But what that is basically you're going to pose different questions or different elements of things that people need to go find out. They will go search it as a group, so you're getting the student-to-student interaction, they're talking amongst each other again, and then eventually they will one way or the other pull that back out to the overall group or share it amongst the groups, so that they're not only learning that one piece of knowledge you had them go look at, but they're also now sharing it over to other pieces of the class so that all of them are getting the overall knowledge. And then you as the instructor, you kind of just facilitate that to make sure all the information is accurate that's coming out to the big group. But again, those two things are breaking them into little groups on the side, the mechanics to do that, and then they're going to start talking and working with each other, buddying up, bantering, having a good time. It makes it more engaging. So again, all of these are purposeful ways that we are trying to get student-to-student interaction inside of a class or an activity or something like that. The more we can build that up, the more engaging it is, the more fun they're having, the better off the experience will be. So the last one we want to talk about is the student-to-instructor engagement. Now, many college professors will mess this up because they will stand in front of the class and lecture for an hour and a half, and they'll say that that's student-to-instructor engagement because I'm talking to you the whole time. That's truly student-to-content because they're just passively getting that content in, and it's not, as we talked about earlier, a good way to get that content in. We want it to be active, not passive. The student-to-instructor, you have to think of almost more in a one-on-one or a small group type scenario. Now in a massive class with a whole bunch of students, it's going to be a little harder, but you'll get pockets of this where you can kind of float around, especially if you're using that group work we talked about in the student-to-student communication. You can float to the different groups and just kind of see what's going on. You're going to end up being more of a facilitator in these cases. You're going to make sure that you're guiding them on, you're giving them advice, but you're not directly answering or giving them the information. So you're kind of building up that like almost mentor type thing of pushing them in that direction rather than being a sole source of knowledge. Because with the internet and stuff blowing up all over the last 2-3 decades, information's out there. Now we just need to guide them to be able to figure out how to get to that. The other thing you can do as an instructor to build up that student-to-instructor contact or interaction is to use the Socratic method. You know, it's one of the oldest ones that are out there. But when students start asking you questions, again, don't go into a mode where they're passively going to get an answer that you just regurgitate out a 5-minute story about. Some instructors are super good at that, and it works, but that's not the majority. So why don't we go into a Socratic method and we start asking them, okay, well, what do you think? How do you think you would go about that? Where would you look to solve that? That's a good question, but let's see if we can figure out the process to fix that first. So it's again, putting it back on them to think through the process, and you're more, again, facilitating how they go through that rather than giving them that direct answer. And then the last thing is always on our feedback. We're supposed to give good, timely feedback as instructors, but the more feedback we can give to that individual student to, again, guide them on that path, the more connection they build with you that you're sitting there trying to help them. That's building that student-to-instructor interaction throughout an overall class, not only an activity, but that's also going to make it more engaging. They're not going to want to let you down because you went and took that time to go ahead and give them all of that information in that time. So again, it's building that relationship through that interaction. If we can forcefully get that interaction in there, we're going to make it a lot more engaging, a lot more exciting. So now we were talking about the 3 individual items and how those interactions play with each other. But we got to think too, okay, yeah, that works in individual courses, activities, content. Sometimes it's really hard to get all 3 of those merged into material, but if you can do it, it's great. But what we're trying to do is in the form of a lesson, or in the form of a day, or in the form of a week, depending on, if you're teaching K-12 or college or whatever, you want to try and get a blend of those intentional interactions, all 3 of them, so that it makes the overall experience of that day or that lesson, that module, that course, more engaging for the students. So it takes a lot of planning, it takes a lot of thinking out front. You can put these individual elements on, you can make that piece of material interactive by using an interactive software or something. But if you have the interactive software that then guides them into a student-to-student interaction where they're building more knowledge, and you're coming in and giving feedback and facilitation, you've just purposefully built in all 3 interactions, and it's working a million times better and being a more engaging lesson than, again, you just standing up there and passively giving them the information. So we want to try to think of ways in our classes that we can put all 3 elements into an individual lesson or a day or however long you've got a class period, so that it makes it more engaging, more exciting for the students. The more engaged, the more excited, the more motivated they are, the better chance they've got to learn and retain that information. So that's what we're shooting for when we look through these interactions. So hopefully that kind of cleared up some of the things of how to make things stronger in your class, particularly with the interactions. Again, visual design, doing relevance, all that kind of stuff we can talk about in different videos. But in this one, I'm hoping you guys learned the 3 interactions. I'm hoping you saw the benefits of trying to implement those interactions and think through them. And I'm hoping that you guys saw that there is a possible way to kind of have all 3 of those into an individual lesson in order to make that particular lesson more engaging and more exciting for your students. So hopefully that, again, if you were forced to watch this video, it didn't bore you to death. If you stumbled upon it, I hope you got something out of it. One way or the other, I hope you got something out of it. If you guys can think of other ways to be able to add in any of the 3 interactions, feel free to put those in the comment boxes below, and we'll see if we can't add those to a future video. I'm always looking for more ways to be able to get some better materials and better things in the classroom. So go ahead and post those down there. If you haven't, subscribe to the channel, because we're going to try and post some more videos like this where they're just out there for general knowledge and those that want to try to make everything better. With that being said, though, this one's gotten a little bit long, so I'm going to go ahead and bugger out. And if you guys need anything, feel free to just reach out to us. Otherwise, have a great day, guys. Thanks.